The evening unfolded beneath towering crystal chandeliers that cast a golden glow over a grand ballroom, filled with carefully dressed guests, polished smiles, and practiced laughter. Every conversation carried the faint scent of ambition. Every handshake held calculation behind courtesy. This was a gathering where status mattered more than sincerity, and appearances carried more weight than truth. Standing confidently among the crowd was Richard Harley, a man whose reputation preceded him wherever he went. Years of business success had shaped his posture, his voice, and his belief that he belonged at the center of every room. His presence commanded attention, and he relished it. Just a step behind him stood his wife, Eleanor Harley, quiet and composed, observing everything while drawing almost no attention to herself. To most people, she appeared unremarkable, an older woman accompanying her successful husband, content to remain in the background. Few wondered who she truly was, and no one imagined that the silence she carried was once filled with power. Richard moved effortlessly from group to group, recounting achievements, retelling familiar stories with a confidence sharpened by years of praise. Each compliment fed his ego, and each nod of agreement reinforced his belief that his success was entirely his own. Eleanor followed politely, listening without interruption, smiling when required, and remaining invisible when it suited him. When someone addressed her directly, Richard often answered for her, dismissing her opinions with subtle humor disguised as charm. To him, she had become part of the scenery, present but irrelevant. Years earlier, he might have valued her insight, her wisdom, her calm guidance, but success had slowly replaced respect with entitlement. Tonight, surrounded by influential guests, he felt emboldened to display that entitlement openly. As the evening progressed and glasses refilled, Richard's restraint faded. During a conversation with prominent figures, Eleanor gently suggested that he take a break, her tone soft and private, intended only for him. Instead of appreciating her concern, Richard laughed loudly and brushed off her words, making sure others heard. He joked about her being overly cautious, out of touch with the world he now occupied, implying she didn't understand how these gatherings worked. The laughter around him was uncomfortable, hesitant, but no one challenged him. Eleanor felt the weight of every word, not because they were cruel, but because they were careless. She did not argue. She did not defend herself. She simply stepped back into silence, a silence that held decades of restraint. What Richard did not realize, what no one in that room could have guessed, was that Eleanor's silence was not born from weakness. Long before she became known only as Richard Hale's wife, she had lived a life defined by influence, intellect, and authority. In another time, she had been the one invited into rooms where decisions shaped industries and nations. She had advised leaders, negotiated outcomes, and influenced policies that still quietly governed systems people relied on every day. She never chased recognition, and she never needed applause. When she married Richard, she made a conscious choice to step away from the spotlight, believing that partnership meant sacrifice and support. Over time, her absence from public life allowed others, especially her husband, to forget who she had been. Back in the ballroom, Richard raised his glass and delivered another speech, his words filled with pride and self-assurance. He made a light-hearted remark about knowing one's role in life, glancing at Eleanor as if she were part of the joke. This time, the laughter was thinner. Something in the room shifted. Eleanor met his gaze calmly, not with anger or embarrassment, but with clarity. In that moment, she decided she would no longer shrink to protect his ego. She would not interrupt him, but she would not hide either. Across the room, an older man watched her intently, his expression slowly changing from curiosity to recognition. He remembered her not as a wife standing quietly behind a successful man, but as a formidable presence whose words once carried undeniable authority. The host soon took the stage, tapping the microphone to regain attention. As conversations faded, he spoke about legacy, about the unseen architects behind progress, and about individuals whose influence was often overlooked because they chose humility over recognition. Then he mentioned Eleanor Harley by name. The room fell silent. Heads turned. Richard's confident posture stiffened as confusion crossed his face. The host spoke of Eleanor's past work, her role in shaping reforms, her strategic brilliance, and the impact she had quietly left behind before stepping away from public life. Murmurs spread through the crowd as people re-evaluated the woman they had ignored all evening. Eleanor did not look surprised. She stood slowly, her movements calm and assured, and walked toward the stage without hesitation. There was no drama in her expression, no triumph in her eyes, only composure. When she spoke, her voice was steady and thoughtful. She did not recount her achievements to impress, nor did she expose her husband's behavior to embarrass him. Instead, she spoke about partnership, about mutual respect, and about the dangers of allowing success to blind us to the value of those who walk beside us. Every word carried weight, not because it was loud, but because it was honest. The applause that followed was not polite or obligatory. It was sincere. People stood not for spectacle, but for recognition. Richard remained seated, clapping slowly, his face pale with realization. In a single evening, the hierarchy he believed in had collapsed. He had spent years assuming power belonged only to those who spoke the loudest, only to discover that true power often chooses silence. When Eleanor returned to him later, there was no confrontation. He apologized quietly, admitting that somewhere along the way, he had forgotten who she was. She corrected him gently, reminding him that the greater loss was forgetting who they were together. They left the party side by side, not as a man leading a shadow, but as two individuals facing a long overdue truth. That night did not end their story, nor did it magically repair years of imbalance, but it marked a beginning, one built on awareness rather than assumption. Those who witnessed the moment carried it with them long after the music faded, reminded that respect is not earned through titles or wealth, but through recognition of the quiet strength standing beside us. In the end, the lesson was simple yet profound. Power does not always announce itself, and dignity does not demand attention. Sometimes it waits patiently until the world is finally ready to listen.